What happens when one of music's most iconic divas sits down with America's most familiar weatherman and everything suddenly goes completely off script? You're about to find out, because what happened during this morning's Today Show interview is the kind of moment people will be talking about for years. Before we get into the intensity of this confrontation, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think actually sparked this unforgettable clash. The morning at Studio 1A started like any other. Roker had just finished his cheerful weather forecast and was preparing for what seemed like a routine celebrity interview. Chaka, 10-time Grammy-winning queen of funk, had just released her memoir and was touring the morning shows to promote it. Her team specifically requested Al, believing that his friendly, conversational style would make it easier to dive into the personal and emotional sides of her book. Good morning, I'm Roker, and joining me today is the incomparable Chaka, Al said with his usual warm smile. Thank you so much for having me, Al. It's always wonderful to be here, Chaka replied gracefully, dressed in a flowing purple caftan, her iconic curls perfectly styled. The opening minutes were smooth. Al asked about her childhood in Chicago, her early years with Rufus, and what inspired her to finally write her memoir. Chaka spoke thoughtfully, sharing stories about her rise to fame and the challenges she faced as a black woman in the music industry during the 1970s. Your book really sheds light on some difficult periods in your life, Al said, leaning in. You write candidly about your struggles with addiction and how it affected your family relationships. Yes, Chaka replied, her tone becoming serious. I felt it was essential to be honest. Too many people, especially in our community, suffer quietly. If sharing my story helps someone find their path to recovery, it's worth it. That takes incredible courage, Al said approvingly. And speaking of courage, you've never been one to shy away from criticizing the music industry. In your book, you're very outspoken about how record labels treated artists, especially artists of color, during your peak years. Absolutely, Chaka said, her eyes lighting up with passion. The exploitation was systemic. They signed us, profited from our talent, and left us with almost nothing while building empires. I've watched too many brilliant artists destroyed by contracts that were basically modern-day slavery. Al shifted slightly, sensing the energy in the room change. That's a very strong comparison. Slavery? It's the truth, Chaka said firmly, her voice rising. When you sign away your publishing rights for almost nothing, when you're forced to record music you don't want, when you have no control over your artistic vision, what would you call that? I understand your frustration with unfair business practices, Al said carefully. But don't you think comparing it to slavery might be a bit extreme? The temperature in Studio 1A seemed to drop. Chaka's expression hardened and her eyes locked on Al, making the crew uneasy. Extreme? She repeated slowly. Al, with all due respect, you've spent your career in television, working for networks that treated you well. You've never had your culture appropriated, your music stolen, or your royalties manipulated by people who saw you as nothing but a commodity. Al raised his hands, trying to calm the situation. I'm not trying to minimize your experiences, Chaka. I'm only suggesting there might be more suitable ways to describe it without using such a heavy comparison. More suitable for who? Chaka asked, her voice carrying across the studio. For your audience, who wants to sip their coffee and avoid the uncomfortable truths behind their favorite music? The room fell silent, the low hum of cameras the only sound. Al glanced at the producers, clearly unsure how to handle the tension. Maybe we should shift gears a bit, he suggested. You've also been collaborating with younger artists. Don't try to change the subject, Chaka interrupted, pointing at him. You opened the door by questioning my words. What's appropriate is acknowledging that the music industry has a long history of exploiting black artists. Pretending otherwise is ignorance. Al's calm demeanor began to crack. Look, I respect your perspective, but this is a morning show. Viewers tune in for uplifting content, not lectures on systemic problems. You call speaking my truth a lecture? Chaka's voice grew sharper. This is exactly the problem. The moment a black woman gets passionate about injustice, we're labeled angry, lecturing, or too much. That's not what I meant, Al said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what did you mean? She pressed. Because it seems to me you care more about keeping your audience comfortable than actually hearing what I have to say. Al's face flushed red. Chaka, I've conducted thousands of interviews over decades. I know what a respectful conversation looks like. Do you? She shot back. Right now, it feels like you're policing my language, softening my truth for your viewers. That's not respect. It's control. The producers were frantically signaling, but Al and Chaka were locked in a verbal battle. I'm not trying to control anything, Al said, his voice tight. I just want a productive conversation. But when you make comparisons and accusations like that, it makes meaningful dialogue almost impossible. Impossible? Chaka's voice snapped like thunder. What's impossible is pretending my pain didn't happen. Losing millions while executives profited, that's impossible to ignore. Paying to perform my own songs, that's impossible to forget. That's reality. That's not what I said, Al protested, his voice rising with strain. I'm talking about how you present these issues. There's a difference between sharing your story and generalizing about the entire industry. Chaka laughed bitterly. Generalizing? Al, do you know how many of my peers from the 70s and 80s live in poverty? How many died broke while the labels that made fortunes off their talent are still thriving? This isn't a generalization. It's a pattern. I sympathize, Al said, leaning back slightly. But on national TV, making sweeping statements without context, that's irresponsible. Irresponsible. Chaka's eyes narrowed. What's irresponsible is sitting in your comfortable chair, your steady paycheck, telling a woman who lived through decades of exploitation that she's being irresponsible for speaking out. That's not fair, Al protested. You don't know what I've faced. You're right, I don't, Chaka said, razor sharp. But I do know you've never been told your natural hair isn't marketable. I know you've never watched others get rich off songs you poured your soul into. I know you've never been told to smile more, complain less, be less angry about injustice. Al's jaw tightened. You think I haven't faced discrimination? I've been attacked, threatened, harassed. Don't lecture me about struggle. Then you should understand why speaking truth is essential. Chaka fired back. Yet here you are, trying to silence me. I'm not silencing you, Al said, matching her intensity. But a morning show about your memoir isn't the place for a political manifesto. A manifesto? Chaka's voice erupted. Talking about my life is a manifesto? This is exactly the problem. The moment truth is uncomfortable, it's labeled political, inappropriate, and too much. The tension in the studio was almost unbearable. Camera operators exchanged nervous glances. Look, Al said, rubbing his forehead. I came here to celebrate your career, your music, your book. Instead, we're in a shouting match our viewers didn't expect. Our viewers? Chaka said, dripping with disdain. You mean your viewers, the ones you protect from hearing reality. God forbid they have to think beyond the morning coffee. That's not fair, Al protested. The Today Show covers serious issues all the time. Safe issues, Chaka countered. Controlled, curated, sanitized. But when I speak the raw truth, suddenly I'm too much. The raw truth? Al asked, shaking. The raw truth is you came to promote a book and turned it into an attack on me and this show. Chaka stood so fast her chair slid back. Yes, I'm angry. After 50 years, I still have to fight to speak my own truth. Al stood as well, but Chaka's presence dominated the room. If you can't have a civil conversation without conflict, Al said sharply, maybe television interviews aren't for you. The silence was deafening. Chaka's voice dropped to a dangerous low. Not the right platform for me? I've been on television since before you knew what a weather map was. Johnny Carson, Oprah Winfrey, none of them ever told me what platform was right for me. Al realized he'd crossed a line but refused to back down. I'm talking about constructive conversation, not creating controversy for its own sake. Controversy? Chaka erupted. You think I enjoy this? This is my life. Decades of pain dismissed as inappropriate for your morning show. The producers were signaling frantically, but the cameras rolled on. I never dismissed your pain, Al said, voice wavering. I just don't see why every interview has to turn into a battle. Why can't we focus on your achievements, your music, your book? Because my achievements don't exist without the struggle, Chaka said fiercely. You can't separate my art from my experience, and you sure can't ignore the oppression that shaped it. Fine, Al said, throwing up his hands. But must every conversation be about oppression? Can't we highlight the positives? The positives? Chaka laughed bitterly. You want me to celebrate success while pretending the pain didn't exist. That's erasure. You want me to perform happiness while ignoring the suffering. I'm asking for balance, Al said, desperation creeping in. A conversation that doesn't alienate the audience before we get to the good stuff. There it is, Chaka said, pointing at him. Your real concern is ratings, comfort, audience. Not my truth, not my story. Al's face was purple with frustration. Yes, I care about our viewers. Millions rely on us to start their day inspired, not angry. Angry? Chaka's voice thundered. 50 years of struggle and respect reduced to anger. You just proved my point. She ripped off her microphone, hands shaking. You want sanitized stories? You can have them, without me. Chaka, wait, Al called, panicked. Let's find common ground. Common ground? She said coldly. That disappeared the moment you decided my truth was too uncomfortable. I respect you, Al said. Your talent, your strength. No, Chaka cut him off. You respect the version of me that fits neatly in your audience's comfort zone. The moment I speak unfiltered truth, suddenly I'm inappropriate. That's not true, Al said weakly. It's completely true, Chaka snapped. And you probably don't even see it. You've been conditioned to expect black women to soften themselves. When we bring fire, you can't handle it. The studio was frozen in shock. I hope your audience enjoys their comfortable morning, Chaka said icily. But don't ever ask another black artist to perform for your comfort. With the poise that has defined her career, she turned and walked away. Chaka, wait, Al called, but she didn't stop. He turned to the cameras, pale and shaken. We'll be right back, he muttered. Chaka was gone, leaving behind stunned faces and a weatherman who had just learned that some storms can't be predicted, controlled, or softened with a smile. The Queen of Funk had spoken her truth, and no amount of morning show politeness could change it. So, what do you think really triggered this confrontation? Was it Al trying to police her words, or was it something deeper? Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment with your thoughts on what caused this unforgettable showdown.